Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Vittorio Orbinato. I'm from University of Naples Federico II in Italy, and today I'm going to present to you our work titled The Power of Words Generating PowerShell Attacks from Natural Language. First of all, let's start with some context. Over the last decade, over the last few years, cyber attacks have been growing in numbers and complexity, becoming more sophisticated, stealthy, multi-vector, and multi-stage, with advanced persistent threats emerging or APTs in short, emerging as the most dangerous threat actor. But why are APTs so dangerous? Because they are carried out by cybercriminal and state-sponsored groups, which provides them with potentially unlimited resources. APTs perform carefully planned stealthy attacks that span over long periods of time. So they try to stay undetected for as long as possible before carrying out the actual attack. To better understand how these kind of attackers think and operate and to mitigate their attacks, we may rely on offensive security practices, such as red teaming and adversary emulation, which focus on post-compromise scenarios. So basically, they assume that the attacker has already gained access to our target infrastructure and is silently infecting hosts, escalating privileges, harvesting credentials, exfiltrating data, and so on. And this is what makes offensive security strategies fit to emulate APTs. Offensive security aims to overcome the limitations of reactive security measures, granting several advantages such as better understanding of threats, comprehensive testing, identification of weaknesses, and so on. However, to adopt such strategies, we still need a way to replicate the behavior of adversary, which is ever-evolving, ever-changing. And over the last years, recently, we have seen an increasing popularity from a solution which is the use of large language models, or LLMs, also applied to the security context. Basically, LLMs are used to assist security in this context, to assist security analysts in writing custom software through the so-called neural machine translation, or NMT. In general, neural machine translation means translating a language into another. For instance, wherever you're using Google Translate, you're basically translating a language into another. But what we're interested in is neural machine translation used to traduce natural language into code, into a programming language. So basically, what we want to do with NMT is to provide a model with a natural language description, which I will refer as intent in the following, that describes the behavior, the desired behavior of the code snippet we want to implement, we want to generate in this case. And then the model ideally will provide us with a code snippet that implements such a behavior, the desired behavior. These kind of generative models are predominantly trained on mainstream programming language, such as Python, Java, and so on. But as you probably understood from the title of the presentation, what we were interested in was the PowerShell language, which is a key tool for cybersecurity in Windows systems. But why Windows as an operating system, as a target platform, and why the PowerShell language? We focus on Windows. We focused on the Windows operating system because it's one of the most targeted platforms in the cybersecurity landscape for attacks. And as you can see from this graph, over the last year, the most detected attack technique was one related to command and scripting interpreter for PowerShell. So highlighting how much Windows is targeted as an operating system, as a target platform. And the PowerShell language represents a common vessel for pursuing attacks, for carrying out attacks, because it's bundled in all Windows systems and allows attackers to perform attacks without necessarily having to deliver a malicious payload on the target machine. So what we did was to investigate NMT models to translate natural language intents into PowerShell code that tries to emulate, to replicate the APT behavior, the attacker's behavior. In our research study, we analyzed and focused on different strategies for data collection and training. In particular, we focused on both pre-training and fine-tuning for our models. Pre-training aims to tailor these models in the generation of PowerShell code, so to let the models understand the properties, the features of the PowerShell code, while fine-tuning aims to let the models understand the specific features of offensive code, which is the actual downstream task we want them to carry out. So given the generated PowerShell code, we performed multiple quantitative evaluations, starting from an output similarity evaluation to compare the textual similarity of the generated code to the ground truth, a syntactic evaluation, and also an execution evaluation to assess the behavior to perform a behavioral analysis on the generated code. But let's start from pre-training. We leveraged the so-called domain adaptive pre-training. So basically, given a model that has already been trained on massive heterogeneous corpora, we perform additional rounds of training with domain-specific data to let the model understand the general features of the programming language we want to generate. I want to highlight that pre-training entails unsupervised learning, and that's why we built a novel dataset of general purpose that encompasses around 90,000 samples of general purpose PowerShell scripts, so not only related to security, that were extracted from GitHub, as the one you can see in this slide. So basically, this dataset only contains PowerShell code without any natural language description. After pre-training our models, we moved on to fine-tuning, for which we needed another dataset of offensive PowerShell code. But in this case, fine-tuning relies on supervised learning. So basically, every sample in our dataset includes a pair: a natural language description, which is the intent describing the code of that sample, and then the corresponding PowerShell code that implements the behavior described in the intent. We extracted data to build this dataset from offensive security tools and public security-related knowledge bases. And in this example, you can see a code snippet extracted from an adversary emulation tool called Caldera that represents and implements a technique called unsecure credentials in registry, as you can see on line 9. So what we did was to extract the code that you can see on line 14, which will be the PowerShell code in our entry, in our dataset entry, and then extract as natural language description as the intent, the description you see on line 5 in this case. So search for possible credentials stored in registry. Just to provide you with some numbers about our dataset, it encompasses around 1,100 samples, which is a size that is in line with that of other datasets using state-of-the-art code generation. And it covers 12 of 14 attack tactics from the attack framework. Just for context, a tactic represents a high-level goal of an attacker. The first analysis we carried out was the output similarity evaluation, the output similarity analysis, which is based on a token-by-token comparison between the generated code and the ground truth code, so the reference code. Specifically, we focused on these 4 metrics, output similarity metrics that you see on this slide, which are metrics that are widely used to assess the performance of AI-based code generators in many code generation tasks, including those related to security contexts. Just for context, I reported on this slide metrics for state-of-the-art code generation for other programming languages, such as Python, the Python language, and Unix shell code. And as we can see, our models, the performances of our models are in line with those of state-of-the-art code generators, with some models even exceeding the values of metrics such as Meteor and edit distance, and with Code T5+ resulting as the best performing model on this evaluation. To better understand the performance of the models, let's take a look at some examples. On the first row of this table, you can see an example of failure case from the models. So basically, we can see that the model is able to generate almost all the option flags and variable names correctly, except for the first one, which is missing. And there's also another failure in this code generation example, because the command name includes the HTML word, which is additional, is not included in it's not part of the original command. And this may be based on the natural language description, which features this word in the intent. As you can read on the left-hand side, invoke compiled HTML help. The second row is an example of successful generation, of successful prediction, and is indicative of a concept of implicit model knowledge, we could say, because the model is able to generate a correct PowerShell command, leveraging alternative equivalent versions of PowerShell's option flags. For instance, we can see that in the ground truth, we have the exec option flag, and in the model output, we have execution policy, which is still a valid option as option flag, and is also an equivalent one. After this evaluation, we performed a syntactic analysis to evaluate the adherence of our generated PowerShell code to PowerShell syntax and also its compliance with common PowerShell programming conventions through the use of static analyzers. As you can see in this example, we were interested in both parse errors in the PowerShell code, such as a missing value expression after the assignment operator or a missing terminator in a string, but also in warnings, such as the one you see in this example related to a variable that is assigned but never used. For this evaluation, we leveraged two main metrics called the single syntax accuracy score and the comparative syntax accuracy. The first one measures the percentage of outputs without parse errors, independently from the reference command in the ground truth, while the second one measures the percentage of outputs that do not deviate from the conventions of the best practices. But why is it called comparative syntax accuracy? Because in this case, we consider the results of the evaluation through the static analyzer compared to the reference command, to the ground truth. So if the command, both the ground truth command and the generated one present the same parse errors, these are excluded from the counting process. And why is that? Because some reference command may include, in our dataset, include stub templates for option flags and templates. So this kind of decision aims to filter out from the analysis parse errors related to these templates, associated with these templates. And we can see, we can see that all our models achieve an accuracy for both the single syntax and comparative syntax score higher than 90%, which exceeds 98% if we look at CodeGPT and CodeGen, which are the best performing model on this kind of evaluation. We also performed an execution analysis to evaluate the code, the generated code at runtime. So we're not only interested in the textual similarity between the generated code and the ground truth, in the syntactic quality, but also in a behavioral analysis to verify if the generated code actually behaves as the code in the ground truth. So we analyzed the behavior of this code in terms of events occurring in the system. So what we did was to set up a test bed that was able to automatically execute both the generated and the reference code in a sandbox environment and compare the generated events. The sandbox environment is a virtualized Windows 10 machine that is equipped with all the red and blue team security tools used by the commands in our dataset, and we assume that these tools had been previously infiltrated by an attacker on the target machine, which is typical of advanced malicious campaign and of offensive security simulations, basically. Also, to run the generated code in the target system on the target machine, on the virtualized machine, we assume the scenario in which the attacker has already bypassed some of the defensive mechanisms of the security mechanisms, such as disabling the Microsoft Defender firewall, for instance, and the Windows Defender antivirus. What we did was to compare the generated set of events using an F1 score-like measure, and we conducted the analysis using a sample of 35 entries. So, which are which is a set of entries that were flawlessly generated by our models. So that closely resemble the ground truth. So given the ground truth and the generated command, we compared the set of events by measuring their overlap. And what we did was to perform multiple repeated runs of the code to discard events that only occur sporadically, for instance, because of non-determinism sources in the system. And the results outline that the execution F1 score is quite high for all of our models, exceeding 88%. So even though there were differences in the textual similarity analysis, in the output similarity analysis between the generated code and the ground truth, we can see that the generated code closely resembles and matches the behavior of the ground truth code, so in terms of dynamic events generated in the system. Finally, we wanted to to assess the specialized capabilities of our models, of our specifically trained models in generating PowerShell code for offensive security tasks with those of a closed source privately fine-tuned model, not specifically trained for this task. And we chose ChatGPT for this purpose, 3.5, because it was, at the time of this work, the most recent freely available version. So we chose ChatGPT because it is used nowadays for a wide variety of tasks, including code generation, but maybe not always for security-related purposes. What we did was to provide ChatGPT with a description of the task to perform and some example of natural language code pairs from our dataset, and then provided the list of natural language intents description to translate into PowerShell code. What we can see from the result of this analysis is that ChatGPT achieves notable performance in terms of syntactic quality of the generated code, with a performance that is close to that of our best performing models, but it achieves poorer performance based on the execution analysis and on the output similarity one. So we can state that our models achieve that specifically fine-tuned models for this kind of tasks achieve better performance than a model that wasn't specifically trained on this kind of task. To conclude my presentation, we can state that we demonstrated that AI-based code generators are fit to generate offensive PowerShell code with significant performance across all the evaluations that we performed on the generated code, that domain-specific fine-tuning allows this kind of models to outperform state-of-the-art privately fine-tuned models such as ChatGPT. And as future work in this field, we aim to include further analysis of the generated code. For instance, another behavioral analysis, another execution analysis that aims to understand whether this offensive code is actually able to evade detection measures, for instance, but also the generation of complete attack flows. So of PowerShell, not only of single-line PowerShell code snippets, but of PowerShell scripts that try to emulate the complete attack flow, attack life cycle of an attack. So I thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any question you may have.